what's up YouTube? This is Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change your front brake pads and your front rotors on a 2008 Toyota Matrix. It is also the same as a Toyota Corolla and a Pontiac Vibe. Now the first thing we're going to do before we pull this caliper off is compress the caliper piston back in. And the easiest way to do that is just use a screwdriver, put it in this window, and just pry it between the brake pad and the caliper just by pulling that or prying that towards you. And that's okay if the steering moves just a little bit. Okay, and that's about as far as it'll go. Now the next thing we're going to do is take off these two bolts, and these are a 14mm bolt head, and you just release that. Now we can set those aside for now. Now, when you take off the caliper, I like to not let it dangle from the brake line, so I'm going to set it over here. I'm going to set it here on just on the little steering tie rod here, and that'll just keep it from falling down. And I'm putting it over here to give us access to these larger caliper bolts in the back. Now those are a 17mm, and we need to break those loose. I'm using a breaker bar on this one. Let's see if we can get the bottom one here as well. Make sure you've got your hand supporting it over here, or just keep one hand on it or else it'll just drop. You can take these pads out first or leave them in and just pull them out once you get it down. You can see that'll come off with the pads. These pads are obviously completely worn out, and we can change those here in a minute. Now the next thing, we just need to pull off the old rotor. And you can see this rotor is, from the discoloration, you can see that it's gotten hot and it's somewhat warped, and so we're going to go ahead and replace it this time. Okay, now we can put our new rotor back on and in place. And on this caliper support bracket that also holds our brake pads, I'm just going to pull the old pads out of there. And we can put this caliper support bracket back on just like so. You'll just have to support that with one hand while you get those bolts started in the back. Now these are really tight. We're gonna torque these down later to the proper spec, but go ahead and just double check your manual before you tighten those. Okay, now we can put our new brake pads on, and you'll see I've got some of this brake grease. I like to put a little dab or two on the back side of the pad, just on the shim here, and then just smooth that out. Just a really thin layer is all you really need. And then I like to put a little bit on each of these little metal tabs that will fit into these little retainer clips right here. Just make sure you don't get any of the brake grease on the pad material. And this, you'll see this has got that little noise maker, this little clip. I like to put that on the inboard pad facing down, so that as the car rotates, this will be pulled down and it'll make some noise. You just pop that into place here. Same thing on the outside pad. just a couple dabs of this little brake grease here, just enough to give you a little thin layer on the back of that shim. And then a little bit at each of these little ends, and that will slide right into place right there, like so. Now we can put our brake caliper back on, and remember we pushed that piston in with the screwdriver as far as we could. Let's see if that's enough. There, that's just barely enough to fit over these new pads with the rotor. If it's too tight, sometimes I'll use this brake caliper compression tool and just push that in so that you've got a little bit more room. We can put these caliper bolts back in. These are the 14mm head there. And you'll notice on these slide pins there's a little flat spot here that sits up against that flat spot on the caliper itself, and that keeps the slide pin from spinning when you tighten that. And again, you want to double check your manual on the torque spec here, and we'll double check that before we put the tire back on and get this back on down the road. But that's pretty much everything. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck.